Shin Godzilla, also known as Godzilla Resurgence, is directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, written by Hideaki Anno, and stars Hiroki Hasegawa. And in Shin Godzilla, very simply put, Godzilla appears off the coast of Tokyo and the Japanese government has to figure out how to kill it. First things first, I am referring to this movie as Shin Godzilla, not Godzilla Resurgence, because that's the Japanese title. I mean, Shin Godzilla is the Japanese title, and the word resurgence will forever be associated with Independence Day for me, so thank you very much, Roland Emmerich. Now, I watched this movie on a complete whim. I had no plans to see it, but I had some free time, so I figured, why not? It's a Godzilla movie, it's Japanese, might be fun. And it turns out that Shin Godzilla might just be the weirdest movie I've ever seen in a cinema. It's really so difficult for me to talk about this movie because for every utterly bizarre choice it makes, it does something that's legitimately compelling. So this is gonna be an interesting review, just brace yourselves. Let's start with the visuals, because when you hear about a Godzilla movie, you know, the first thing you think about is the spectacle. Unfortunately, there's a lot of really obvious CGI here. There's no real artfulness either to the cinematography, so I can't really say that this is a good-looking movie. And in terms of how Godzilla itself looks, you never actually believe that it's there. You know, it's a combination of CGI and practical effects, and it looks pretty fake. But the thing is, precisely because it looks fake, it's like the creepiest looking Godzilla I've ever seen, because it's really expressionless and it looks just so alien and it's just standing there in the middle of Tokyo that it kind of got under my skin. Of course, you still get the classic Godzilla screech, but nothing else really in the sound is really all that believable. However, there is a pretty good musical score throughout this movie that kind of comes off as comedic at times, but it actually works given just how bizarre this entire thing is. Now, in terms of editing, the individual scenes here are edited well because there are really snappy cuts during all these conference room sessions that make the things that they're talking about somewhat riveting and kind of urgent. I feel like I have to stress this point though. 80% of this movie is nameless people in rooms talking to each other about protocol and, you know, government things, and it's all really fast and it's just talking, and it's really weird. However, while these individual scenes are edited well in themselves, the editing between scenes is just terrible. There is no sense of pacing, in my opinion, or progression of time. Because of this movie feels a lot longer than it actually is, and I'm actually gonna take back what I said just like a few seconds ago. You don't actually really feel the urgency in the situation here because so much of this movie is talking, and I don't know, it just feels like it's such a cerebral movie, which I feel like works against the whole monster movie thing. I don't know. But you know what? If this movie was cerebral, I would be fine with that if it was also emotional. Unfortunately, there's absolutely no emotional engagement to be had in this movie with regard to the plot, because it's purely a procedural film that kind of comes across more like just a detailed account of how to kill Godzilla. It feels like reading a Wikipedia entry about how to deal with a real-life Godzilla. I swear that this movie comes off more like an essay. It feels like you're reading an essay. Despite the fact that this movie does not offer anything emotional to latch onto, it's undeniably really original that kind of makes it compelling to watch. I feel like this is the make or break factor. If you'll appreciate like just the downright strangeness and uniqueness of the way this movie is written, you probably will enjoy yourself. But for me, I kind of would have appreciated it more if the script didn't come off sounding like a report that was just being reported to the audience. Now, all these scenes that happen in the conference rooms are actually pretty creatively directed and they're pretty fun. They use a lot of handheld cameras, and there's frequent use of television footage to break up the long stretches of dialogue. And I will say that when Godzilla first surfaces, there is this kind of palpable sense of dread because, you know, there's just no stopping this thing. However, as the movie progresses, it kind of screeches to a halt because it's not really that exciting. Like I said, you don't really feel the urgency, and because the approach of this movie to this story is so clinical, like, you don't really feel any threat to human life, and you don't really care that, you know, huge parts of Tokyo have been demolished. Like, I don't know, it's so surface level, but it's really interesting surface level. Even all the actors seem to be kind of like an afterthought in this movie. The side characters, I will say, and the characters who have very minor speaking roles are done well. You know, they have a little bit of comedy sprinkled into this movie, and they play their parts well. However, all the main actors just are not memorable at all. You don't care about any of them, and they don't add any humanity to the proceedings. I really don't know what else to say about Shin Godzilla, so I'm just gonna end my review here and say that I didn't really like it, although it's really, really interesting. I can understand if people will like this movie. I'll also totally understand if you hate this movie. but I still think it's kind of worth watching just because it's so one of a kind. So those are my thoughts on Shin Godzilla. If you guys have seen it, tell me what you thought about it, and if you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.